So to kick things off, I'm going to hand over to Sarah. Sarah is a leading authority on work-life issues in the UK. She led the charity Working Families for 24 years and was appointed an OBE for services to quality of life issues in 2007. I've worked closely with this Sarah in the past. In fact, as she reminded us all this morning, she was our boss. Very good one, I have to say. And she's incredibly knowledgeable and passionate about this subject. So, Sarah, thank you so much. Over to you.
Well, thank you, and good morning, absolutely everybody. Lisa, what you asked me to do was to look back and tell my story. So, I grew up in Perth in the 70s. I went to uni in England. I fetched up in London in 1981. I met a Londoner. I'm still here today. You can see by the football on the back of the wall. I've got two South London kids now in their 20s. And during my working life, things have changed hugely for working women, for women generally. I mean, when I was a teenager, working women were routinely refused mortgages in their own right. They needed the signature of a male guarantor. A married woman's income still had to be declared on her husband's tax return in the 80s. And until 1990, married women were routinely taxed under their husband's tax code, which I guess partly explains why I refused to move in with my partner when our baby was first born in 1991, and I held out in my shared house for 6 months. Things needed to change, and that was my way of making a point. And things were changing. If we look at how the number of women in the workforce has grown over the past 50 years, today around 80% of men work and around 70% of women. And that's the smallest gap since records began in 1971. And initially that was the result of the Education Act in 1945 and women being better educated. It was partly deindustrialization and the jobs that needed traditional male skills were becoming fewer. And almost all of the growth of women's work has been working mothers, because from the 70s onwards, employers wanted women to stay at work once they became a parent. So you look at the economic participation rate for women with no children, that hasn't changed particularly. That of mothers has jumped up, so that today, mothers are just like fathers. They're far more likely to be in work than someone of the same gender who doesn't have children. So 1991, I was already a campaigner. Before I became pregnant, I ran a charity that sent medical aid to Nicaragua. When I went back to work, it was to an international conflict resolution charity. And I went back part-time. My partner earned far more than I did. He was in the oil industry, he traveled a lot, and it was really hard looking after the baby on my own. But what very quickly became apparent was that part-time and career ambition didn't mix, and that annoyed me. So when I saw an ad to be the chief executive of what was then called the Working Mothers Association at 30 hours a week, well, that was my next job. And that was 1994, and I left in 2018. I never worked full-time again, and I was the boss, as Lisa said, which illustrates, though, both the pros and the cons of flexible working. It really delivers huge employee loyalty and employee continuity, but you can get stuck. Now, I was totally committed to the cause, and I still am. But honestly, if a headhunter had phoned me up and said, do you want to be the part-time chief exec of blah, blah, I might well have been interested. Funnily enough, they never did. So the working world in the 1990s, when I got started on this agenda, men and women increasingly equal in terms of their presence in the workforce, but far from equal in how they were treated and as a result in how they were able to contribute. So there was paid maternity leave. That was 18 weeks only, and it was only for some women. Paid paternity leave didn't exist. We campaigned for childcare. We wanted more part-time jobs. We wanted flexible jobs, flexi start and finish time. We wanted understanding bosses who'd let a mother arrive 15 minutes late after nursery drop-off and then take a shorter lunch break to make up. So I look back now and I see two game changers, the 1997 Labour government and digital technology. So in 97, Labour had been out of power for 18 years, and a group of visionary Labour women had not wasted that time. Harriet Harman, Margaret Hodge, Patricia Hewitt, every working parent today owes them a huge debt. They did the hard yards, they talked to ordinary women, they were researching, they were building up the evidence, they were engaging employers, and then they toughed it out with the guys once they were in power. And the result was a huge expansion in childcare provision and affordability. Maternity leave was first made a right for everyone, and then it was gradually increased to 52 weeks. Paternity leave, I'm afraid, was still a bit of an afterthought. It was only ever 2 weeks, and that was only from 2003, and it's still a glaring inequality that needs to be sorted. And the right to request flexible working was introduced in 2002. And it's funny thinking back about how anxious and cautious everybody was about flexible working. The unions were worried that it would destroy full-time jobs for men. And employers were worried that the proverbial floodgates were going to open and nobody would ever work on Fridays again, which has to be still a very good idea. So it was initially restricted to parents of young children only, and then slowly we got it extended, first to carers for adults, then to parents of all children under the age of 18. And then the final extension came in 2012. That was to all employees, and it was delivered by the coalition government, because by then we had champions in Theresa May and Jo Swinson. And they'd been convinced too that true equality for women at work would only come about if fathers had the chance to be equal at home. And that resulted in shared parental leave, which, for all its faults and its problems, it has, at least for some couples, been a game changer, as it has too for the small but increasing number of employers who've been spurred to equalise maternity and paternity leave and pay as a result. And then the other game changer was tech. That's let us question where and when work needs to be done. The first major piece of research that I commissioned was in 2001. It was looking at city organisations, and it found that organisations were not taking full advantage of what was then called new technology. Now, since then, our lives have obviously been transformed, and on the whole, for the better, by our digital connectedness. Lockdown, even 15 years ago, would have been far harder, both in terms of isolation and its impact on the economy. Today, there can no longer be any question about flexing where and when we work. It feels like we've made an enforced leap forward, and now we've got a chance to embed lasting change, more working from home and more thought and care about how we use time and people at work, who needs to be present on site and when. And that leaves me hoping that we're going to finally be brave enough to tackle the biggest question, which is how much work and how long in any job. So there you go, Lisa. There's a quick look back.
Sarah, thank you so much for that. There's so much in those 6 minutes there, and I love just hearing how involved you've been at all those different stages of progress. And we've come a long way, you know, since the start of all this campaigning, but there is still a way to go. But as you say, this, you know, awful time that we're all experiencing just now, I do believe that it will help to accelerate that change. I think 2 points that you mentioned there are really interesting, that there's that perception definitely that part-time and career doesn't mix, which certainly has to be something that, you know,
that's still a huge problem. That's the thing we've really got to tackle now.
Yes, and you can get, and people get stuck, and we hear that all the time, don't we? When if you're only working part-time, you get stuck at a certain level. So I think that's 2 points from what you said that I'd like to pull out. But thank you so much. Insightful and nodule as ever. Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to hand over now to Peter Lawson. Peter is a training manager at RBS, and he's within the technology division, and he's passionate about working rights. He's also the Global Vice Chair and Global Carers Lead for the Family and Carers Employee-Led Network within RBS. And Peter works flexibly as he cares for his wife, who has multiple sclerosis. Thanks so much, Peter. Over to you. You might just need to unmute, Peter.
I'm always doing that. Fantastic. Hi, everybody. Well, if Sarah managed to say all that in 6 minutes, I should have no problems. So, hi, everybody. So, as Lisa said, I work flexibly at RBS. So, my personal situation is my wife has multiple sclerosis. She's had it for nearly 20 years. She's currently off work. She had quite a severe relapse at the end of February. So actually spent the whole of March and April in hospital, which meant that the start of lockdown, I was actually here on my own and not caring for her, and she was in hospital, which was quite challenging because it was a case of I couldn't visit, and it was video calls and quite literally throw her clothes in the door, and the nurses threw her dirty clothes out the door so I could take them home and wash them, which was a very interesting situation. So I work flexibly now. My wife has carers 4 times a day and has district nurses, OTs, and everybody coming in at all points. So from my personal point of view, the lockdown has actually been quite a good thing because it's meant that I've not had any challenges about working from home all of the time. So from that point of view, the lockdown has been quite good for me in terms of that. But it's also in terms of my work, it's set a huge number of discussions going about how we work and how we work as we go forward. So NatWest Group, as we're called now, RBS still in Scotland, but NatWest Group, we still have over 70,000 employees globally, and we currently have over 50,000 working remotely from home. So my current situation is we have been told by our CEO that basically we are working from home till at least the end of September, and that when we come back, things will not be the same as before lockdown. So because of my position in the network, I'm party to quite a lot of the discussions that have been going on. So I'm part of something called the Colleague Advisory Panel that runs our organisation. So I've been on several calls that have involved members of the board, the chief HR officer, the chief exec, and the chairman, all giving their views on how we've worked flexibly in the past and what we're looking like going forward. So I've actually had a little bit of flexibility in my work and a little bit of home working for probably about 10 years now. I was first given flexibility because I had to miss one day every 4 weeks because my wife was on a drugs trial, and she moved from England to Scotland, and the drugs trial was not been run in Scotland. So every 4 weeks we had to go back to a hospital in Newcastle for her to get her drugs. So I was given that flexibility at that point, and gradually, with the ability to work remotely and work from home, there's been more opportunity to do that for specific reasons, for the odd day here and there. And then a couple of years ago, the company introduced something called Choice, which effectively meant that we could work from home 2 days a week. What we are now being told, and the conversations that I've had with people such as the chair and the chief HR officer, is that the company always wanted people to work more flexibly, but they were a little bit scared to do it because they didn't know how it would work. Now the change has been forced upon them. They can see the benefits, and obviously there are benefits to mental health, etc., and well-being, certainly for some people, if not all, about being in an office and having that personal interaction with people. But I think there's going to be much more flexibility in terms of how you can choose to work, because some people need to be in the office more. There's certain jobs within the bank, like there are in a lot of occupations, where regulatory constraints mean that people really do have to be in the office, but that's gradually changing all the time. One thing that I do know that's happening is where we were looking to potentially move people into different offices and maybe look at our footprint. I know for a fact there is one office that we have in the centre of London which is not going to be reopening post-lockdown, because we're looking at those ways of working. And I think the way we're looking moving forward is that people are going to be measuring performance very much on has the work got done, rather than how people are actually doing the job, etc. Because there's going to be a lot more remote working. It's going to be much more performance based on everything getting done. And also the steer we've been very much given is that the way the company is looking going forward is they're looking at offices as an area for people to come into to collaborate. They're not looking at it as the default position of where people should be going forward. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that. But we're certainly, with the progressive, Alison Rose has been a fantastic CEO since she took over, and a sponsor of the employee-led networks, and really passionate about work-life balance in the past. It's looking very positive for people, I think, within our industry as a whole, but within the bank in particular. about there's going to be a lot more choice and a lot more flexibility, and we're going to have a lot more say in how we want to work going forwards.
Brilliant. Peter, thank you so much. And I think you've shared just a brilliant example of a different reason why someone might be looking for flexibility. I think people assume a lot of the time that flexible working is for, mums specifically, but actually there's lots of reasons why people want and ask for flexibility. So thank you so much for sharing that story with us. And a couple of points I just want to pick up on: choice that you mentioned. A big part of this is enabling people to have choice and a bit more control over how they work, which, as we know, makes people happier and more productive. And I think what you said about focusing on, performance and not necessarily time spent in an office in a physical space is really important too. It's not just about, someone being present somewhere, but it's actually looking at their output. Really interesting what you're saying about how the office is looking at office space as more of a collaboration space, so all these new ideas coming through. And it's great that the CEO is so invested in all of the employee networks that you have, which must make a massive difference to all of you and how you work. So thank you so much for sharing your story, Peter. Thank you. We're now going to ask Kim Ritchie, who's a director at Flat White Communications, to speak. Flat White Communications was founded when Kim was pregnant with her second child. And this was the time, she says, that she truly realised her desperate need and desire to work flexibly. And Kim is also the founder of the Scottish Mothers Collective, which is an online forum supporting working mums in Scotland. And I've attended a couple of events that Kim has organised, and she is definitely a powerful influencer in this area. So Kim, over to you.
Hi guys, hi, nice to meet you all digitally, or virtually should I say. So yeah, Lisa really invited me on just to kind of share a bit of my story and I guess my journey to where we've got to today with Flat White. So I worked in PR for a long time. My first role was a head of PR role at House of Fraser. So it was a fashion PR role. I was up and down to London. It was very, very kind of on the go. And having kids just was something that wasn't really talked about. I remember going for my interview with one of the regional directors, and he kind of joked to me, "So you're engaged now, eh? What's that going to mean?" And I remember kind of giggling nervously, thinking, what is that? And I think at the time I was quite naive and it went over my head. But now having spoken to friends that are in recruitment, this is a common thing that women go through. I remember having a male recruitment consultant who actually didn't even want to ask what the maternity perks for me is. He thought it would send the wrong impression. So when I was at House of Fraser, I did fall pregnant, and I remember being so nervous, really, really scared to tell my employers at the time that, I was going to have a baby. And I think that in itself, taken in isolation, just shows how much the ethos of, working women has to change. That idea that we can't talk about having children when we're working in jobs that we're succeeding at is just absolutely ridiculous. And, the sentiment that women have to pretend they don't have a job when they're at home and they don't have a family when they're at work really, really strung true for me when I was at House of Fraser. So I kind of went off on maternity leave, had my baby, went back to work. But, at the whole time I was there, I felt like I was playing two parts. I was going into my fashion PR role and I was, schmoozing up and down. But then when I would get home, I was so desperate to see my babies and I wanted to talk about them at work, but I kind of felt like I couldn't do two things. So I decided to start the Scottish Mothers Collective, which was for me, I was off on mat leave. I was feeling quite isolated. I was used to doing this busy job. And I thought to myself, there has to be a voice, for working mums that are proud of their careers and proud of what they do, but also want to be celebrated, for having their babies. And I think, we can do both. So I fell pregnant with my second child. At this point, my role was changing. I was looking after part of England and I was expected to kind of go up and down once and twice a week. And, having two young children, it just wasn't going to be a viable option for me. I put a kind of number of case study kind of situations to my bosses, and it was told it wasn't going to be a viable option for me to keep working there. So that was okay. I realized that. So with literally my 3-month-old baby on a sling, I sat and thought, right, I'm going to create my own agency. So Flat White Communications was literally born with my 2-year-old, down here, my baby on my string. But, I was productive and I was focused, and I really I had this kind of desire to change. And we have a small organization, but one thing that's really part of our infrastructure is that the idea of the construct of a 9-to-5 working day, or people having to work, to that traditional working pattern, doesn't exist for me, and it certainly doesn't exist for anyone that we bring in. And actually, one of the things we have at the bottom of our working emails is, we'll respond to you at a time that's convenient for us. Please respond, to our email in a time that works for you. And I know this is replicated with a lot of other brands, because I think, as one of the other speakers said, the idea, and actually since kind of COVID times, the idea that we have to respond in this 9-to-5 day, I just don't think it's realistic anymore, and it's certainly not the way people work. So for Flat White, we really wanted to change that. We work with a number of freelancers, and we say to them, this is the work that's expected, do it in your own time. And people are always quite taken aback when we say that, but we get the best results from them, because I think, you're putting trust into your employees, you're giving them a bit of autonomy, and, they really deliver. But, I think for me, the idea is that for flexible working, and as Peter said, one of the biggest challenges that we see is that flexible working has been tacked onto parents when it's not. It's for carers, it's for, grandparents that help out. It has to be for everybody. We've really tried to build it into our ethos that flexible working isn't about a cop-out. It's not about, not doing the work. It's about working flexibly at a time that suits you. And we find that we just get, the most amazing results from our freelancers and our employees, because we're giving them that bit of trust. I think just going back to the process, what the biggest thing for me, and one of the events we've done regularly is SMC, is people, when they're going back to ask for flexible working post-maternity, you just cannot articulate. And I think that there's a lot of work still to be done about opening up that dialogue. We should be able to talk about, what are the paternity benefits, the same as we do about any other company perk. But, that still doesn't exist to an extent. I mean, how many times have we probably all sat in interviews and been told about, that 15% off gym membership you'll get at Virgin Gyms, but absolutely no mention, of what your maternity holidays will be and whether that can be split paternity leave. So, and it's not a vanity project. It's Parenthood is about, making the best out of the job market. And one of the other things that we're really passionate about is this juggle that, is assigned to mums. I think if we continue to flip between being family focused or career minded, ultimately we're going to lose at both. So for us, it's about, establishing boundaries. And I think that was something we talked about, Lisa, on the phone. We're quite upfront with our clients. This is the hours that we work in. We'll respond, at a time that's convenient to us. We're efficient. We deliver for our clients, but we don't work around the clock. We don't feel that kind of immediacy to reply. And especially right now, these COVID times, I think that as a nation, we've got a lot more understanding and empathetic to the way that people need to work, but I don't think productivity has necessarily suffered from that. And I appreciate that changes from industry to industry, but I think, if there's anything we've learned over these 3 months, it's that we don't need to be in this rigid working pattern. We don't need to be, micromanaged at desks, and it certainly doesn't mean that everybody's having a Skype at home. I think for me, it's about setting boundaries, and at Flat White, we certainly give a good delivery to our clients. And when we employ any staff, we don't have them on, that traditional strict working pattern. It's all about working flexibly and getting the best out of our employees and delivering for our clients, really.
Kim, thank you so much. That was flipping inspiring. I think you said so much, and I'm sure that kind of it just rang true for so many of us. Certainly what you talked about is certainly many things that I've experienced, and I'm sure for many people here. I love what you said. We can do both. We can have a family, we can have other things in our life, outside interest, volunteering opportunities, other things in our life, and work. And I guess that's about a human approach to work. We're not two different people. We are the same person, at working at home, and kind of having that way of working. It's just, it's much more effective, productive for everyone. And I loved what you said, really practical, establishing boundaries. We don't always have to be saying, I'll get back to immediately. Establishing boundaries about what you can offer and when is a really practical tip to get things managed with between your work and your home life. Thank you so much. That was brilliant. We've also, while you were talking there's been lots of comments and messages coming through. Someone has brought their child to join a 12-year-old daughter to join the webinar, and said she's just been blown away by what has been said and what Sarah was talking about what things used to be like, about, you know, no time off for parents and there was no flexible working. So this webinar is helping to inspire the next generation, so thank you for that. There was another comment from possibly one of Peter's colleagues who was also saying that they've had a great experience working at RBS and the flexibility has really helped them. So keep the comments and questions coming through on the Q&A function. And also just a note, if you would like to message everyone, there's in the to button, you just make sure you write to everyone and not just the panelists, so everyone can see your comments. Okay, so thank you so much, Kim. We are now on to David. So David McKeand is Regional Account Manager at Fortinet, and David changed his working pattern after becoming a dad, and he believes that achieving a work-life balance, he can be more present as a father and contribute to household work, something that is often undervalued and wrongfully perceived as the work of women. And as I am very good friends with David's wife, I can confirm this to be true. So David, over to you.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and thanks very much for inviting me along today to have a quick chat about my flexible working journey. When I was actually thinking about it after you'd asked me to join, I thought I don't really have much to say, but actually, realistically, I've actually been doing this for 11 years, and 11 years last week as well. So for 11 years, I've had flexible working from multiple employers as well. So I maybe do have a bit of a story to tell, but the world's changed. We're all on Zoom. And who knew what Zoom was 3 months ago? Nobody knew what it was, or Microsoft Teams, and the collaboration suddenly fundamentally changed, and it's going to change forever. This isn't we're all going to go back to the office, as Peter mentioned. You know, this is now, it's how it then works for us going forward. So my journey started in 2009 when my daughter Emily was born, and I didn't want to be a dad that left the house at 7 in the morning and get back at 7 at night, and hopefully put my daughter down to sleep. And if I was delayed and I wouldn't see her, I wanted to play an active part in it, and I wanted to share that responsibility with Emily's mum as well. And it became very, very obvious to me that I needed to change my working pattern. But as a dad of a new family, I couldn't afford to then reduce my hours to be able to do it. So I had to try and find something that worked for the organisation. I was working for the Student Loans Company at the time, and for me as well. So there's a bit of a balance, and as we go through, you know, there's a balance for the organisation as well as you personally. So I had a number of conversations with my direct management, and, you know, at that time, 2009, you know, there wasn't the Flexibility Works organisations, there wasn't legislation, as Sarah mentioned, and stuff like that. And I know it was all around mothers that were coming back from maternity leave, and for fathers, it was very frowned upon. You know, you go back after your 2 weeks and then you carry on full time. That's what happened. But I wanted to be an active part of my newborn baby, so ended up agreeing that I would do four days compressed hours. And be off on a Friday, ironically, Sarah. So that was my Friday off was definitely worthwhile. But, you know, and it was still, there was stigma attached to that as well. You know, we're not talking that long ago, but it was still, for fathers trying to do flexible work, it was very difficult. So then we go forward a couple of years. I took a role within HP and started looking after UK-wide customers. I didn't have the confidence at that point to then ask to move and to be able to have flexible working at that point. I felt as if I needed to prove myself and then be able to ask later on. So then again, once again, retrofitting, you know, it's all about trust. I think Lisa mentioned this at the beginning. It's all about how much do the employers trust the employees. At times, do they trust them to actually not sit at home and watch Loose Women, or, you know, or to give them that flexibility. But anyway, so I went back to full time. Very quickly realised that I was up and down the country. It was now in a worse situation than I was before. I was travelling a lot. I wasn't seeing my daughter at all, and it became very difficult. So Emily started school in 2014. Unfortunately, at that point, Emily's mum and I had separated, so I was a single dad for half the week and not for the other half. So I had to change. I wanted to be able to do school pickups and drop-offs and go to school shows and stuff. It's fundamentally important to me that I was there and I was front and centre with my daughter. And again, had to have a conversation, but I had a conversation with, you know, HP is a large organisation, but again, 2014, still not any legislation really around how fathers can really work flexibly, or just generally just how flexible working works. But we agreed Monday to Wednesday, I would be out and about in client sites, and then Thursday and Friday I was still working for clients, but I'd be at home, so I'd be able to do school pickups and drop-offs. But it was a gentleman's agreement. There wasn't any contractual agreement at that point. So it became on a Monday or a Tuesday, I would then get a phone call going, oh no, we need you to go to Doncaster or Manchester or somewhere on Thursday. I'd then lose time. It was quite fluid and flexible. It didn't really work for me at all. So fast forward to 2015, and I was headhunted and offered a job at Fortinet, where I am now. And the part of the contract negotiation, I realised actually what's important to me, and what was important to me was actually the flexible working part of it. It wasn't the role was great, and I wanted to progress my career. But I also wanted that flexibility. I didn't, Kim mentioned about the £15 Virgin Gyms membership and stuff like that. All that kind of stuff sort of became insignificant. Primary focus and primary point of negotiation actually wasn't salary. It was my flexible working to be able to work. So we agreed, and I signed a contract that said, once again, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I was working out and about, and I was looking after global finance. I was down in London a lot. I was in RBS offices in Goulburn. But on Thursday and Friday, I was at home, and I was able to go and get my daughter at 3 o'clock. I was able to drop her off at 9 o'clock. And I was given that trust to say, but it was so important to me that it was a contractual agreement. So it wasn't just on an HP point of view, where it was just a gentleman's agreement. So 2017, I get remarried. I've now got a stepson as well. I want to be able to afford him the ability that I give to my daughter, which is to be there and to be active. So took on a role within Scotland. So a lot of my travel is now sort of stopped in terms of getting the red eye at 6:30 on a Monday morning and be back at 9:30 at night. But the ability to be able to have that flexible working, that trust, is so important from an employer, to be able to give you that ability to be able to go home and know that you're going to do your work. And I think that moves into where we are now. So for the last 3 months, we've all been working from home. There's been terrible stories of retail organisations making staff redundant and stuff, but for the lion's share of the people, everyone's been doing their jobs. And from a technology point of view, there is no reason, unless you work in a manufacturing, construction, or something that fundamentally needs you to be physically on site, you can work from home. Technology, Peter mentioned RBS will get 50,000 staff working from home. I bet you that wasn't 50,000 staff working from home on the 1st of March. That's ramped up massively in that period of time. Companies can do it, and there's actually no technology reason why they can't do it. But I think we've now moved from that situation where people expect you to be in an office. As we come out of lockdown, it's going to be fundamentally important that we look at how flexible working works, and organisations have now got a chance to be able to redefine and actually define a flexible working policy. You look at Amazon, and you look at Twitter and Google, and I shared an article with Lisa yesterday around Tesco Bank taking on flexible working staff as well. But we all sort of laughed at them probably about 2 years ago when they had slides in their offices and they had bean bags, and they were all about the flexible working. But actually now, if you don't offer it as an employer, then actually you're going to lose out on top talent. There's a potential that actually even geographic barriers to job hiring actually now moves as well. Because why can't you go and work for an organisation in New York? Because if you're all working from home, it's actually irrelevant where you are. We've all got internet access. We can all do our jobs from the house. So that was sort of my story. I think the key thing is trust. And one last thing is, if you are an employee and you are wanting to start to discuss flexible working, then have the conversation now. We're now in the situation that we do need to have flexible working, and the option is there. And if you're not having it, somebody else in your team, or your manager, and your manager's managers will all be having that conversation. So thank you very much.
Oh, David, that was flipping brilliant. Thank you so much. So interesting to hear your journey and all the challenges that you've had, but also so many important points there. I mean, having the confidence, I think, to have that conversation initially, and I think particularly for men, we know that to be true. You don't see so many, or you haven't traditionally seen so many men working flexibly. So who are those role models to look to say, this is okay, this is all right for me to ask for that flexibility that I so want for my family or for my particular situation? And I think you hit the nail on the head about trust. If someone is clear about what their team has to do and it's all about outputs, then trust your team to get on with it, regardless of where they are, and think about how to manage your team remotely. And really interesting what you were saying, your last role, you were attracted to that role because it offered flexibility specifically, and that was a key part of your reason to move there. So that whole talent attraction piece, and Julianne, I think it was mentioned when you were talking, she's recently taken a role only on the, you know, the agreement that there will be a level of flexibility. So that's absolutely true. And we talk about a lot the importance of flexibility, not only just once you're in a role, but at the point of recruitment. So we know in Scotland, for example, that 3/4 of us, pre-COVID this was, we're looking for some sort of flexibility, but actually only 1 in its 9 or 10 jobs, it's creeping up slightly, are advertised as flexible. So there's that real disconnect between people who want it and what jobs are advertised as flexibility, and people are losing out on talent, as you say. So thank you so much. I think a lot of that would have resonated with so many people here today. David, thank you. Okay, so we're going on to our last speaker today. We have Liz Law, who's an inspector in Police Scotland. Liz has been working flexibly while managing a long-term health condition. She is Deputy Chair of Police Scotland's Disability and Carers Association, which supports staff across the organisation and influences change. So over to you, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. So I'm delighted to be here this morning to share with you my story. And as my story, it's very personal to me. So I am an employee, I'm an inspector in Police Scotland, and I've been in the police now for 21 years. And I have worked flexibly in the organisation for the last 9 years. So being asked to speak to you today I've had to reflect back over my time in the police, and I think it's really important to acknowledge just how far that we've come and acknowledge just how far that I've come. When I joined the organisation, it was 7-day shifts. We worked 7 early, 7 late, 7 nights. We had 2 days off a week or a day and a half, and there was a high chance that you would be at court, you know, giving evidence for one of your cases on your days off as well. The culture was being present, it was working until the job was done, and there was also lots of overtime and very little time off. But, you know, I was young, I was enthusiastic, so I accepted it, and you just, you know, got on with it. So 5 years into my career, I landed my dream job. It was the reason why I joined the police, and it was a detective constable in a scenes of crime role. And it was an absolutely fabulous, fabulous job. I loved every minute of it. However, there was even less flexibility in that role. Very, very long shifts, unpredictable hours and unpredictable locations. I worked an on-call system. I was on call, called out regularly through the night and working the next day. And also because of dealing with more serious cases, there was more court citations and more travelling for court. So there was even less flexibility there, and I would go as far as to say that flexible working was probably quite a taboo subject. I would not have dared have walked into the detective inspector's office and asked for flexible working at that point in my career. So moving forwards, 12 years into my police career, things had really changed for me. Career-wise, I'd been promoted to sergeant, which was absolutely fantastic, but I was also managing a health condition, and the effects of working quite long, often unpredictable hours were actually starting to take its toll on my health. I also, at that time, became a mum, so it was a bit of a double whammy, if you like, a parent and a health condition. And whilst off on maternity leave, I realised that something had to give, and I didn't want that to be my health. I went through a period of time where I did consider if this was a career for me, and then I thought, I'm just going to ask, I'm going to apply for flexible working. So in 2012, I applied for reduced hours. I wanted to reduce my hours to 60%. And I also applied for fixed shifts, which I'd looked at what I needed as an individual to manage my health. And, you know, I just asked for it, I had the conversation, and I was fortunate enough that it was agreed. And I think it's important to look at the reality of, you know, being midway through your career and making such a, you know, a radical change to your working hours. Obviously, I reduced my pay. You know, that was a 40% pay reduction, but I was quite happy to, you know, accept that. That's what I needed. and also not all roles within the police were suitable, and it did somewhat limit my career path at that time. But I took the decision that I was just going to embrace no matter what job I had within the organisation, and and do it really well. And the benefits, I mean, there's so many benefits I've found from working flexibly. I have absolutely no regrets whatsoever. Flexible working really works for me. I absolutely love it. Personally, the health benefits are amazing. Anybody that experiences a long-term condition knows about the ups and the downs that go with that. And I can manage that very successfully, but also very discreetly. And then there's the family benefits. I'm a mum of 2 young boys now as well, and the family benefits are amazing as well. I get to spend more time with them. I get to be there for them for their events and things as well. Just that, I think a lot of people have alluded to the benefits you have with the family. And the work benefits. Now, I genuinely believe that I'm far more productive because I'm part-time. When I go into work, I'm really, really focused. And I think, that's a really strong work ethic. And I think as well, I'm less tired, I'm less ground down by the daily grind or the daily politics that go with work. So I can come in quite fresh. And also, I have noticed over my time being, working flexibly, that nobody has actually ever taken the other proportion of my posts. So there is definitely an organisational benefit, a saving to be had there. And, guess what, the work still gets done, and I've not really had any complaints, so I must be doing something right. So to come a bit more up to date, a year ago, I was promoted again to inspector, and that was a really big deal for me. I went for that as somebody who worked flexibly, somebody with no intentions of not working flexibly when I was promoted. And, to be honest, I've retained my work plan. There was absolutely no issues about it. There was a juggle to find a role that would suit, because this is policing, not every role is going to be suited. But for me now, I think there's even more benefits that I can have. I can swap a day if I need to. If I need to work more, I can work more. If I need to vary a start or finish time, that's all there. That's all available to me. And also, being, in a promoted post, I'm now that inspector. I'm now that person that people come to when they're wanting to consider flexible working, and I have that understanding, and I have helped, a lot of people, put together their application and figure out what they need. And I've seen a few staff having quite a successful application for flexible working. So to bring us right up to date, COVID, obviously COVID's changed everything. It's changed everything in our organisation as well. So I'm currently working from home, and the role that I have within the organisation, I'm pretty much able to do everything that I can remotely, thanks to technology, which is a real game changer. And it's fantastic. This is, the last couple of months has been the first time I've experienced home working, and it's absolutely great. And looking into the future, I can see that this is a real game changer, for people with a disability, people with a care and responsibility as well. There's real opportunity here to make that work-life balance better. And personally speaking, I think I could look at doing more at a time that suits. So just to sum up, I was asked to leave you with a thought and my message. So in 2010, I made my own little motto, and I call it my Triple H motto, and it's something that I refer to, and it is essentially health, home and happiness. And these are the 3 things that really matter to me. And if I get those right, then my life stays in a better balance. And for me, health is number 1. Flexible working has been absolutely key to me keeping, those in balance, and I will continue and fully intend to use flexible working moving forwards. Thank you.
Oh, Liz, thank you so much. What an inspiring, beautiful personal story. Thank you for sharing that with us, and for all the reasons that you've asked for flexible working and have worked so hard to embed that in your life and make that work for you and your family. Thank you so much. And I love your Triple H motto. I think that's brilliant, and that's gonna stick in my head for sure. And also really inspiring. I mean, Police Scotland, potentially quite a traditional organisation and how it's run. So it's encouraging to see things are progressing. I know there's been a couple of comments and questions about your role in the organisation specifically, which we'll come to just now. So Liz, thank you so much for sharing your story there. That was so interesting, so powerful. Thank you. There's loads of questions. Thank you everyone for all your comments and questions. I'm going to hand over to Geraldine now, one of my colleagues, who's going to put a couple of those questions to our panel. We've got just shy of 10 minutes left. Geraldine.
Okay, thank you everyone. So first of all, a question that's come through from both Gillian and John is about the benefits to employers of flexible working. So they've both highlighted in different ways that on an individual level, people are more innovative, creative, better well-being in terms of working flexibly, but they wanted the panel to address the business case for flexible working and the benefits specifically to employers.
Okay, who wants to pick up on that first of all? The benefits to employers. Peter?
I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, the one obvious thing that comes from having more people working flexibly is you need less offices, you need less office space. So that's obviously the given that you actually get with that. One of the things that we've been finding is that it's actually made it easier to make decisions faster in terms of the innovation that's been required, because as David said about us having all of those people working flexibly, a lot of people had access to do it, but just never really did. And I think the previous record for us having people working flexibly, I think we had maybe about 25,000 at one point when we had lots of bad weather. So things have developed, but because we've needed to make changes about being able to make funds available to companies for emergency loans, etc. People have found it much easier to make decisions quicker because they've not been feeling they had to have face-to-face meetings and try and get everybody together all the time to discuss things. Mm-hmm. So it's actually made a lot of those processes a lot slicker, and people have been finding real benefit from that and feeling that they can put forward ideas more. So it's really been quite liberating for some areas of the organisation.
Thanks, Peter. Sarah, do you want to add something to that?
I would just chip in a couple of thoughts. One is to think about the links between flexibility and diversity. So flexible working allows you as an organisation to engage and retain a greater diversity of people. And then you then look at the links, the proven links between diversity and performance, and greater diversity and greater innovation. So those are two really fundamental things for any business. The other is the link between, which I think Liz expressed so well, the link between flexibility and happiness. Happiness feeds through to engagement, engagement feeds through to performance again. So, you know, that's your basic business case. And I'd also just finish off by saying that all the evidence is that high trust organizations work faster in the way that Peter's describing. And if you work faster and take decisions more quickly, your costs go down. So you've got a high trust benefit coming out of flexible working as well.
Okay, thank you. Geraldine, so another question?
Okay, and next, in relation to flexible working, there's been quite a lot of chat and comments about flexible recruitment and negotiating at the point of offer. So it can, people find it difficult to have that conversation about flexible working and flexible hours at the point of offer. And for some, it's actually been the deal breaker that has meant they've had to walk away from certain job offers because there hasn't been any flexibility.
Okay, who wants to pick up on that? Has anyone maybe had an experience?
I probably mentioned that, so I'll take that one. So yeah, so absolutely. So when I was negotiating with Fortinet, it was definitely, you know, it became that instead of it being the elephant in the room, you know, I put it down, stake in the ground that was the requirement. I think recruiters probably have a detachment from company policy as well. I think the recruitment team or the HR team also need to make sure that they're in line with what it is. So as we're advertising roles, we're actually putting it in as one of the top 3 benefits of working and going to an organisation. But also just having that conversation. I've turned down roles since 2015 and joining Fortinet because they will not offer flexible working. And I think it's you've just got to have that upfront conversation with them, because if you don't, you'll end up in the situation I was in HP, where I was all over the country and I wasn't having any flexible working, and actually it was in a worse situation than before. So I think it's important that you have that conversation. It shouldn't be a taboo subject. It shouldn't be something that's got stigma attached to it. You know, as everyone's mentioned today, the productivity is improved, decision making's improved as well. You know, as Peter mentioned earlier, companies are able to work faster and make decisions quicker. But I think it's come to a point where we used to always stick in a meeting and we'd stick in an hour, and we'd talk for 25, 30 minutes about something or nothing. But now we're actually moving to meetings where they're 15 minutes long, because you'll go on a Zoom call. Nobody wants to be on a Zoom call or a Teams call or something for endless points throughout the day. But then it gives us a chance that everyone's going to be making a decision very quickly, and then the meeting ends and we carry on. So decision making is going to be key. But going back to recruitment, you've just got to have that conversation, and you've got to be upfront with it.
And do you think it's been easier now that you've kind of reached a certain level of seniority? Have you found it easier to have the conversation now that you've reached a certain level of your career than you perhaps did before?
Absolutely, and I think I have open conversations. I have open conversations with my clients and with staff within the organisation as well, and within Fortinet, because I'm not ashamed that I have a contract that says I'm allowed to work remotely and I'm allowed to work flexibly at all. So, you know, I do a lot of work, but, you know, the trust is there from the organisation. But yeah, it's definitely the conversation.
The conversation at that point of hire. Okay, thank you. Before I just ask Geraldine to come up with another question, Jill had made a point about the public sector and how in many cases the public sector can be ahead of the private sector in terms of offering flexible working. She was talking about working a 9-day fortnight back in 1986, so that's good news, and we've heard a lot of great examples. Actually, thank you, Jill, for pointing that out across different parts of the public sector about being open to flexibility. So that's a great point. Thank you for that. Geraldine, we've got a couple of minutes left. Is there one final question that you'd like to put to the panel?
Yep, one question actually specifically for Liz Law of Police Scotland. This is in relation to the police force, whether or not, in your opinion, officers are more likely to get flexible working arrangements agreed if they have a medical reason or caring responsibilities, or if you feel that the police force in general is moving more towards a flexible working culture.
I think it's different for police officers than it is for police staff, because we're employed under police regulations, and anybody can apply for flexible working, and it's a case by case basis, and that's how flexible working is assessed, looking at what somebody needs, and it goes through a management structure, and so I wouldn't say that one is more likely to succeed than another. It would really depend on the circumstances that an individual was asking for.
Okay, thanks so much, Liz. I think that's a really good point to end on. I think this conversation could go on. It's been an amazingly rich and varied amount of contributions. Thank you all so much. Thank you to Liz, to Sarah, to Peter, to David, and to Kim for all of your talks today. And thank you to everyone for your comments and your questions. If we haven't got to one of your questions today, we'll follow up afterwards by email, okay, with any kind of contribution we can make. But thank you all so much. What a brilliant conversation we've had today. I think the time is right, really, to be taking this flexible working conversation forward. I think we've all mentioned how COVID has really, pushed forward and accelerated everyone's desire to work differently. It's proven that we can work remotely when we're given, the chance to do it, and it's been under very difficult circumstances. So imagine what we can do under more normal times. I'd like to remind you that we're happy at Flexibility Works to pick up any conversations that you would like to have, any support or help you might need with your own flexible working future or within your organisation. So please do give us a shout if you would like any help with that. Really hope you all enjoyed the event today. We hope we see you at another Flexibility Works event. Take care, everyone. Have a great day and see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.